One seemingly ordinary evening, a single father happened to see an elderly homeless man hunched over, rummaging through a trash bin for something to eat. His body was frail, trembling from hunger and cold, his eyes vacant like someone who had lost all memory. The father could have looked away. His own life was already heavy enough, raising a young daughter alone after his wife died from a severe illness, debts piling higher each day. But his heart wouldn't let him. He stopped, handed the old man a proper meal, and then made the decision to bring him home. That small family, just him and his little girl, opened their door and their hearts, welcoming the old man like a lost relative. They gave him a warm place to sleep, hot food, and a roof over his head, one they themselves struggled to keep every day. In return, the old man did everything he could to repay them, helping with cleaning, carrying food, wiping tables at the small diner where the father worked, never taking a single cent. What the single father didn't know was that the man he took in was not just a pitiful homeless stranger. He was someone who would change the family's entire life, forever. If you want to continue following emotional stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And before we begin, take a moment to wonder. What happens when a man who has lost his memory starts to remember who he truly is? The evening air was crisp, carrying with it the smell of grilled food and fresh bread from the little shops along the street. The neon sign of Maple Street Diner buzzed softly above Adam Harlow's head as he pushed open the back door and stepped into the dark alley behind the small restaurant. His shift had just ended. His arms were exhausted after hours of wiping tables, pouring coffee, carrying trays heavy with grease. Today felt as long as any other day, and he still had to walk back to the tiny apartment where his daughter Sophie was waiting for him. As he dragged the heavy trash bag toward the dumpster, something caught his eye. A shape sat slumped near the mouth of the alley, half hidden in shadow. At first Adam thought it was just a pile of discarded blankets, but then he saw movement. Someone was curled up and trembling. It was an old man, his shoulders hunched against the cold, his thin hands rummaging through a torn plastic bag full of breadcrumbs. His gray beard was tangled, his clothes stained and torn. He looked so frail it seemed a strong gust of wind could knock him over. Adam stopped, gripping the trash bag. He had seen homeless people around this area before, wandering near bus stops or sleeping curled up on park benches, but he had never stopped to speak to any of them. His mother used to tell him they couldn't afford to help others when they couldn't even pay the electric bill. Yet something about this old man made Adam pause. Maybe it was the way his fingers shook as he picked up a hard scrap of bread from the ground, or those pale blue eyes, empty, as if he were lost in the fog of his own memory. "Hey, sir?" Adam called out, his voice hesitant. The old man didn't react, still staring at the bread scrap. Adam cleared his throat and stepped closer. "Are you all right?" This time, the old man lifted his head, blinking as if just realizing someone was standing in front of him. His gaze was unfocused, wavering, as though he were trying to remember where he was. After a long silence, he slowly nodded, but said nothing. Adam glanced back toward the diner. He wasn't allowed to take free food, but he knew Marlene, the owner, wouldn't notice a little leftover gone. At the end of every shift, they threw away whatever remained. "Wait here a moment," Adam said, then headed back into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a still warm foam container. Not much, just a leftover burger and some fries. But it was warm, and certainly better than what the man had been trying to eat. Adam crouched down, holding out the container. "Here you go. You should eat something." The old man stared at the box for a long time, long enough that Adam worried he didn't understand what he was being given. Then slowly, with frail fingers, he took it. His fingers brushed Adam's for a brief moment, and for the first time, Adam noticed just how cold he was. "Thank you," the old man murmured, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. Adam nodded, shoving his hands into his coat pockets. He should have left. Sophie hated when he came home late. But watching the man take a careful bite of the burger, chewing slowly like someone who hadn't eaten in days, Adam found his feet rooted to the spot. "What's your name?" Adam asked, unable to walk away as he watched him eat. The old man hesitated, his brows knitting as though the question hurt. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if searching for an answer in some far-off memory. "I don't remember," he finally said, lowering his gaze to the food in his hands. "I think it's Theodore." "You think?" Adam frowned. The old man, Theodore, exhaled wearily. "Sometimes I remember. Sometimes I don't. Some days I know everything. Other days, it's like waking up somewhere I don't recognize." He touched his forehead, brushing over a faint scar beneath his tangled hair. "I had an accident, I think. Hit my head. And then everything started drifting." Adam swallowed. It made sense. The old man drifting inside his own mind, grasping for thoughts. "No one's out looking for you." Theodore shook his head, though not with full certainty. Adam sighed. This wasn't what he expected to deal with on an already exhausting night. A man with no home, no memory, nowhere to go. He should walk away. Leave the old man in the darkness and return to his own heavy life. But when he turned to leave, he heard the rustle of fabric. Theodore was struggling to pull the thin blanket tighter around himself, his hands still trembling non-stop. Adam looked at the small container of leftover food in his own hand, the one he had originally planned to bring home. He sighed, making a decision he couldn't fully explain. "Come with me," he said. Theodore blinked, confused. "What?" My place isn't big, but no one will mind if you sleep there for a night. It's warmer than out here, and you won't have to curl up like that." For a moment, Theodore just looked at him, as though weighing whether the man before him could be trusted. Finally, very slowly, he nodded. Adam turned and began walking, and this time, Theodore quietly followed. Adam led the way through the quiet streets, dimly lit by soft yellow lamps, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his worn coat. The night air was colder than he expected, a sharp contrast to the lingering warmth of the Maple Street diner kitchen. Behind him, Theodore walked with a weary gait. Each step was slow and unsure, his thin body leaning forward as though he were carrying the weight of the world on shoulders already past their limit. The only sounds were Adam's sneakers brushing the pavement and, occasionally, a faint sneeze from the shivering old man wrapped in his tattered clothes. Adam glanced back now and then to make sure he was still following. It was hard to believe. Just an hour earlier, Theodore had been nothing more than another lost soul of the city, swallowed by darkness and oblivion. And yet now, Adam felt responsible for bringing him home, as if it were the only right thing left to do. But then the thought of his mother made Adam's heart sink. Catherine Harlow had always been a kind person, but kindness didn't pay rent. The two of them were barely getting by as it was, and now he was bringing home a stranger, a man with no name, no memory, no future, into their cramped apartment. And then there was Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter, soft-hearted and pure. Adam wondered how he would even explain this to her. How do you tell a child that sometimes adults must help strangers, even when they have almost nothing themselves? When they reached the old apartment building, Adam saw the warm kitchen light shining through the thin curtain, a familiar sign of that struggling but loving home. He paused at the door, his hand tightening around the cold metal handle. Maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe his mother would tell the old man to leave, and Adam would have to send Theodore back into the freezing night, pretending it didn't ache somewhere deep inside him. But he took a long breath and pushed the door open. The smell of canned soup and stale bread filled the air. Simple, but comforting. Catherine Harlow stood with her back to them at the stove, stirring a pot of gently bubbling soup. Her brown hair was tied into a loose ponytail, and her shoulders sagged after a long day of cleaning jobs before coming home to cook. The soft sound of the door made her turn around. Her brown eyes narrowed instantly when she saw Adam and the unfamiliar man standing behind him. A brief silence. Then Catherine wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and stepped toward them, her expression difficult to read. "Adam," she said slowly, her gaze shifting between her son and the old man. "Who is this?" Adam hesitated, feeling the weight of the question pressing down on him. How could he explain that he had picked up a human being out of the darkness, from the trash heap of life itself? "His name is Theodore," he finally said, his voice small. "He has nowhere to go." Catherine studied Theodore more closely. The sunken cheeks, the trembling hands, even though he was indoors, the fog in his eyes. Her lips pressed together, not in anger, but as if she were listening to some quiet instinct. Catherine had always been good at reading people, and whatever she saw in the old man was enough to make her let out a soft sigh. "I made extra soup," she said, turning back toward the kitchen. "Come in. Sit down." Adam nearly exhaled in relief. He motioned for Theodore to enter. The old man stepped over the threshold slowly, as though afraid the invitation might be taken back at any moment. Theodore sat at the small dining table, worn uneven by time. Catherine ladled soup into a bowl and placed it in front of him. The old man stared at the soup for a long time, as if the simple act of someone offering him a warm meal was a luxury he had forgotten the feeling of. Then, slowly, he picked up the spoon and took a small sip. His eyes fluttered shut, a trembling breath escaping him, and for the first time that night, Adam saw something besides confusion in the old man's eyes. He saw relief. Catherine sat down across from him, her voice gentler now. "Do you have family?" Theodore paused, lowered the spoon, and let his gaze drift briefly to Adam before returning to Catherine. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely audible. Catherine frowned, but didn't press him. She simply nodded and tore off a piece of bread, placing it beside the bowl. "You can stay here tonight. We don't have much, but at least it's warm." Theodore's mouth parted slightly, his eyebrows trembling in an expression Adam couldn't quite decipher. Gratitude, shock, or both. He bent down again, eating the soup slowly, as if breathing life back into himself. And just then, a tiny voice came from the hallway. "Dad?" Adam turned. Sophie stood in the doorway to the living room, wearing a pale pink nightgown, her brown hair messy from sleep. She rubbed her eyes and stared at the unfamiliar man sitting at their table. "Who's that, Dad?" she asked softly, curiosity bright in her voice. Adam stood and knelt to meet her eye level. "This is Theodore, sweetheart. He's staying with us tonight." Sophie tilted her head, studying the old man for a few seconds. Then, with the effortless kindness only children possess, she smiled brightly and waved. "Hi, Mr. Theodore." Theodore looked at her, and for the first time since Adam had met him, a shaky but genuine smile appeared on his wrinkled face. "Hello," he whispered. And in that moment, in the small kitchen, under the warm yellow light, with the soft clink of a spoon against a bowl, something shifted. Theodore was no longer a stranger. He had become a guest. Morning arrived with a soft light filtering through the thin curtains. Adam woke to faint sounds coming from the living room, the rustle of a blanket, careful footsteps on the old wooden floor. He cracked open the bedroom door and saw Theodore awake, awkwardly folding the worn blanket Catherine had given him the night before. His hands still trembled, but every movement was cautious, as though he didn't want to disturb anyone. "You're up early," Adam said, his voice still thick with sleep. Theodore flinched slightly. I didn't want to bother anyone. I can leave." "No," Adam cut in, stepping closer. "You don't need to go anywhere yet." Even as he said it, he wasn't sure where Theodore should go. Back to the dark alley? A cold park bench? The thought alone made something twist uncomfortably in Adam's chest. Just then, Sophie came bounding out of her room, hair sticking out in all directions, her bright eyes sparkling. "Dad, do we still have toast? I'm hungry." She froze when she saw Theodore, then immediately beamed. "Good morning, Mr. Theodore." Once again, that small but warm smile appeared on the old man's face. "Good morning, little one." Catherine stepped out next, already dressed for work. Simple jeans and a plain t-shirt. "I have to go now," she said briskly. "Adam, walk Sophie to Mrs. Kim's for school. And as for him—" She paused, looking at Theodore with a gentler expression. "If you want to stay here during the day, that's fine. But the door will be locked once we all leave." Theodore shook his head lightly. I can go with him." He looked at Adam, eyes full of quiet hope. "I don't want to sit around doing nothing. I think I used to work. I don't remember what, but I know I used to." Adam frowned. "You want to work? At Maple Street Diner?" Theodore nodded, and his eyes were firmer than they had been the night before. "I can help. I don't want to just wait." An hour later, Adam stood at the back door of Maple Street Diner, Theodore at his side. The old man had bathed for the first time in weeks and wore clean clothes Adam had given him, an old shirt and jeans that were a little too big. He looked entirely different, cleaner, more alive. Just outside the back door, Marlene O'Brien, the owner, an Irish woman in her 50s with red hair streaked by silver and sharp blue eyes, was smoking a cigarette. She raised an eyebrow when she saw Adam arrive with Theodore. "So you've started collecting strays now, Harlow?" Her voice was rough, but not without a buried kindness. Adam took a breath. "Marlene, this is Theodore. He doesn't have anywhere to go. He wants to work." Marlene studied Theodore for a long moment, the gaunt face, the trembling hands, the lingering disorientation in his eyes. Finally, she sighed and crushed her cigarette into the trash can. "Damn these soft-hearted fools," she muttered, then jerked her head toward the restaurant door. "All right, old man. Come in. You can wipe tables. Just don't break anything." Theodore blinked, almost unable to believe what he had heard. Adam's eyes widened too. "Really?" Marlene snapped. "It's not like I'm paying him, and I've had worse employees." Theodore nodded quickly, as if this small allowance were a gift he never dared hope for. He followed Marlene inside. Adam walked in behind them, and the morning rush was already in full swing. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee, the clatter of plates, and the voices of regular customers blended into the familiar soundtrack of diner life. To Theodore, stepping into this place was like entering a completely different world. Marlene tossed Adam an apron. "Find something easy for him. Wipe tables, take out trash. If he gets in my way, I'll throw him out." Adam nodded and handed Theodore a cleaning cloth. "All right, I'll show you how." Theodore accepted the cloth with a weak but steady grip, and there was something strangely determined in the motion, as if he were grasping at a piece of himself he'd lost long ago. And just like that, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Theodore had a job. The day passed like a string of strange, almost surreal moments. Adam kept glancing toward Theodore, half afraid the old man might suddenly collapse from exhaustion, half worried he might forget where he was and wander out into the street. But contrary to every expectation, Theodore kept up. He worked slowly but carefully, wiping each table with the focus of someone handling fragile glass. His hands still trembled, his steps were still unsteady, but he didn't stop, didn't complain, didn't ask for rest. He did everything he could. And when Adam caught Marlene quietly observing from behind the counter, she only muttered, "I've seen worse." At first, customers didn't pay Theodore much attention. To them, he was just another cleaner. But then his silence, that lost yet strangely familiar air, began to draw glances. A few regulars, the ones who came to the diner every morning like clockwork, watched him more closely, than usual. "Hey!" An elderly man in a plaid jacket called out as Theodore walked past. "You're not—" Theodore froze. For a split second, like a faint flash of lightning, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? A memory? Then it vanished. "I don't know," he murmured, shaking his head. The customer seemed ready to say more, but eventually shrugged and returned to his coffee. Adam had seen everything. He saw the way Theodore tried to remember, how something inside him seemed to struggle to open, like a door in his mind locked from the inside. And Adam knew one thing for certain. Theodore wasn't just some random homeless man. He had once been someone important. During lunch break, Adam found Theodore sitting in the back room, staring at his own hands. His fingers curled, uncurled, curled again, as if trying to remember something they were once used to doing. "You okay?" Adam asked, sitting beside him. Theodore didn't answer right away. "I feel like I used to know how to do something. Not wiping tables, something else. Something to do with numbers." He pressed his fingers lightly against his temple, wincing. "I see images. An office, computer screens, people talking about money, investments. But then everything disappears." Adam leaned in, voice gentle. "You'll remember. It just takes time." Theodore looked up, his pale blue eyes heavy with worry. "And what if not? What if I never remember who I am?" Adam didn't have the perfect answer to that. He simply placed a hand on Theodore's shoulder and squeezed gently. "If not, then we'll figure it out. Together." That afternoon, after picking up Sophie from Mrs. Kim's, Adam walked home with both of them. Sophie held Theodore's hand the entire way, as if they'd known each other for years. She chattered non-stop about her school day, the picture she had drawn, and the scandal of Tommy stealing her pink crayon. Theodore listened to every word. His expression softened, focused in a quiet, peaceful way. Adam noticed something had changed. He was no longer the empty shadow Adam had found in the dark alley. He was becoming present. When they reached home, Catherine was already in the kitchen preparing dinner. She cast a discreet glance at Theodore. "How was work?" she asked, as she scooped rice. Theodore sat down, and for the first time, a truly genuine smile spread gently across his lips. I think I did well. Marlene didn't fire me." Catherine laughed, a warm sound that made the small kitchen feel brighter. "That's always a good sign." During dinner, the warm light shone over the old wooden table. The clink of spoons, Sophie's excited school stories, Catherine's occasional laughter, all blended with the aroma of their humble but comforting stew. Theodore sat there, in the middle of all that gentle life, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he belonged, a guest who was no longer a stranger, a part of something bigger than himself, a part of a family. 3 weeks passed, 3 weeks of Theodore living with Adam's family, working at Maple Street Diner, and growing stronger day by day. His hands trembled less, his steps grew steadier, and his eyes, though still fogged at times, began to flash with brief, startling clarity. Marlene had even given him a raise, going from paying him nothing to letting him have 1 free meal per shift. "Don't get used to it," she growled, though Adam often caught her slipping extra bread and soup into a bag for Theodore to take home. Regular customers slowly grew accustomed to his presence. There were still curious glances and whispers, but for the most part, people accepted him as a familiar part of the diner. And then, on a Friday afternoon, everything changed. Adam was taking out the trash behind the diner as the sun set, stretching long shadows across the ground. As he dragged the heavy trash bag toward the dumpster, his foot brushed against something. He bent down. A flyer, slightly crumpled, water-stained. But the image on it was still clear. A black-and-white photo of a man. Theodore. Adam's breath caught. He snatched the flyer up, his heart pounding as he read the text beneath it. Missing Theodore, Theo, Bancroft. Last seen 4 months ago. If found, please contact Olivia Bancroft, 503-535-350-147. Address 2247 West Hills Drive, Portland, Oregon. Adam's fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Theodore had a family. He had a home. He once belonged somewhere, to a life that existed before all this. Adam shoved the back door open and rushed into the diner. Theodore was wiping down a table near the window, his movements slow but focused. "Theodore!" Adam called, his voice low but urgent. The old man looked up, blinking. "What is it?" Adam didn't know where to begin. Marlene was watching from behind the counter. Customers turned to look, but all of it faded into the background. He held out the flyer. "I found this. Outside." Theodore frowned as he looked at the paper. A long silence stretched. Then, slowly, with trembling hands, he took it. As his eyes scanned the words, everything changed. He inhaled sharply. His whole body shook. His jaw tightened. His fingers clawed into the edge of the flyer until the paper crumpled. His eyes widened, and for the first time since Adam met him, that gaze was completely lucid. "I know this place," Theodore whispered, his voice shaky but clear. He lifted his free hand to his temple, pressing hard, as if trying to piece together shattered memories. This is my home." The diner fell into an unnaturally still silence. Even Marlene, who rarely ran out of things to say, stood with her arms crossed, watching without interrupting. Adam swallowed, feeling his throat tighten. "I think so," he said quietly. Theodore's breathing grew uneven, his eyes fixed to the flyer. His thumb brushed the address, the name of the woman, Olivia Bancroft, as though those words might unlock something deep within him. Then suddenly, he looked straight at Adam. A firm, resolute expression. Nothing like the lost, wandering man Adam had found in a dark alley. "We have to go." His voice was decisive. "Take me there. Right now." Before Adam could react, Theodore was already moving toward the door with surprising steadiness, as though the weeks of confusion had never happened. Adam stared after him, heart pounding. He turned to Marlene, half expecting her to bark at him to get back to work. But instead, she simply waved a hand. "Go, kid. Take him home." Adam didn't say another word. He grabbed his coat, pushed the door open, and ran after Theodore into the street, where an entirely new journey had just begun. Adam practically had to run to keep up with Theodore, who was moving quickly along the sidewalk, clutching the missing person flyer as if it were the only thread tethering him to the world. His steps were still slow and uneven, but there was a strange determination in them. The determination of a man chasing something his memory no longer fully held, but whose heart had never forgotten. "Theodore, wait!" Adam placed a hand on his shoulder, gently but firmly enough to stop him. "We can't walk there. West Hills is over an hour away." Theodore turned, his eyes, wild and desperate, fixed on Adam like a plea. "Then how do we get there? I have to go." Adam inhaled deeply and pulled out his old phone. "We'll take the bus." The ride passed in silence, but a silence so tense it felt suffocating. Theodore sat pressed beside Adam, gripping the flyer so tightly the edges bent and tore. His fingers twitched nonstop, his lips moving soundlessly as if trying to relearn the name printed on the paper, the name that might once have been his own. Every now and then he looked out the window at the rows of trees and neighborhoods passing by. His breathing was shallow, fast, as though he feared his memories would slip away if he didn't chase them fast enough. Adam didn't speak, but he could feel the battle raging behind those pale eyes, scattered fragments of a life wrestling to fit back into a shape, a person, a past. a whole existence. When the bus stopped near the address on the flyer, Theodore nearly sprang up before the door even opened. Adam hurried after him, dragged along by the force of the old man's urgency. They stepped onto the sidewalk of a quiet, tidy neighborhood. The houses here were large, well-kept, glowing with warm lights. Nothing like the cramped apartment Adam shared with Sophie. This was a world where people didn't struggle with rent or overdue bills. A completely different universe. And then Theodore froze. His gaze locked onto the house at the end of the street. A two-story white house with dark shutters and soft yellow light spilling from the porch. His breath hitched, his entire body tensed. "That," he whispered, voice thin as wind. Then stronger. Absolute. "That is my home." Before Adam could react, Theodore was already moving toward the porch, his steps unsteady but unstoppable. Adam chased after him, heart pounding. The old man's trembling hand hovered over the doorbell. His finger curled, then pressed. The chime echoed through the late afternoon air, stretching across all three of them like a held breath. A moment of silence. Footsteps. The door opened, and the woman standing there made the entire world go still. She was in her early 30s, tall, fine-featured, with dark brown hair slightly tousled. Like someone who had cried or waited too long, her white blouse was wrinkled from worry and exhaustion. But it was her eyes that mattered. Because the moment they met Theodore's, her entire expression shattered. "Dad!" Just one word, but carrying 4 months of pain, hope, and despair. Theodore staggered back as if the name had struck him like a blow. "Olivia," he exhaled. Then his body buckled. But Olivia lunged forward just in time, catching him before he collapsed onto the porch. And in that moment, Theodore broke into tears. Not soft tears, but the raw, wrenching sobs of a heart torn open after months of being lost inside itself. He clutched his daughter's shirt, his whole body trembling as memories crashed over him like a storm. Olivia held him tightly, tears falling onto his shoulder. The father she had thought was gone forever. Adam turned away. The moment was too intimate, too sacred for a stranger to intrude upon. Yet he stayed, feeling his heart tighten as he witnessed a broken family knitting itself back together before his eyes. Theodore eventually calmed down, standing again with Olivia's support. His face was wet with tears, but lighter, relieved in a way Adam had never seen. My daughter," he stammered. I can't remember everything." Olivia placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. You're home. That's all that matters." She guided him inside, one hand holding him firmly, as if afraid he might vanish again. Adam lingered at the threshold, unsure, hesitant, not knowing whether he should step inside or slip away quietly. But Olivia turned back. Her eyes were red, but filled with deep gratitude. "Please, come in." Her voice was soft but sincere. "I need to know how you found my father." Adam nodded gently and stepped inside. And as the door closed behind him, he had no idea that his life, and little Sophie's, was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. Inside the house was a warm, elegant space, refined in a way that didn't need to boast. The polished hardwood floor reflected the soft glow of the lights. The furniture was modern yet gentle, giving the sense that a real family lived here, not a picture-perfect magazine display. Framed photos lined the walls, family portraits, travel snapshots, moments preserved across the years. Adam stepped in and immediately felt out of place. He tucked his hands into the pockets of his worn coat, standing small, afraid he might break the delicate atmosphere of the home. Olivia guided Theodore to the large sofa. He sat down, sinking into the cushions as if melting into them. Still trembling, but something in his eyes had changed. Less confusion, less emptiness, as though a fragment of memory had finally found its way back. She knelt in front of him, holding his hands. Dad, do you remember anything? Anything at all? Theodore closed his eyes, his brow furrowing deeply as he tried. I remember light, very bright. Then pain, my head. And after that, nothing. He opened his eyes, looking around the room like someone trying to trace the outline of a half-remembered dream. But this place, I know this place. The smell, the light. I know it. Tears spilled again down Olivia's cheeks, but this time they came with a smile. The fragile, explosive smile of hope returned. 4 months, Dad. I've been looking for you for 4 months. I hired private investigators, hung posters everywhere, called every hospital, every police station. I thought you were—" Her voice broke, unable to finish. Theodore tightened his grip on her hand. My child, my little girl. His voice was soft but clear, as though illuminated from somewhere deep in his memory. Adam remained at the edge of the living room, feeling like someone who had walked into a sacred moment. He quietly stepped back, thinking he should give them space. But Olivia turned toward him, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Sorry, I haven't even asked. What's your name? Adam. Adam Harlow. Adam. She repeated it, as if committing it to memory. How did you find my father? Adam told her everything. Finding Theodore in the alley, bringing him home, feeding him, letting him work at the diner, every small detail woven together like threads of a story. Olivia listened without missing a word. She sat still, her hands clasped tight, eyes wide as if afraid to blink and lose something crucial. When Adam finished, Olivia shook her head softly, as though unable to believe the story she had just heard. You brought my father home. You gave him a job. You gave him a family. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to thank you. Adam shook his head, uncomfortable. I just did what felt right. No. Olivia stood, stepping closer to him. You did more than that. You saved my father's life. She placed a hand on his arm, a light touch, but full of gratitude. And I will never forget it. An hour later, Olivia had made tea. They sat in the living room, and she began filling in the blanks Theodore could not fill himself. Theodore Bancroft was not the homeless stranger Adam had once thought. He was a retired tech investor who had built his wealth through smart early investments in Portland startups. He had lived in West Hills for over 20 years and had raised Olivia alone after his wife, Eleanor, died of cancer 8 years earlier. 4 months ago, Theodore had been driving home after an evening at the community center. A truck ran a red light and slammed hard into the side of his car. He survived, but the traumatic brain injury caused severe memory loss. When he regained consciousness at the scene, before the ambulance arrived, he panicked. He didn't know his name, didn't know where he was, and in his fear, he walked away from the site. By the time emergency responders arrived, the car was empty. A missing person report was filed. Olivia searched in despair, and Theodore disappeared into the city, becoming just another nameless figure among thousands of homeless lives, until the day Adam found him. So all this time, Adam said slowly, trying to piece it together, he was just lost. Olivia nodded, her voice thick. The doctors said that can happen after trauma. Some people recover quickly. Some take years. Some never recover. She glanced toward Theodore, now asleep on the sofa, his face finally peaceful. But he came home because of you. Adam didn't know what to say. He only nodded quietly, feeling a heavy, sacred weight in his chest, thinking of Sophie holding Theodore's hand, the meals they shared, Catherine giving him a place to sleep. No one had known he was a millionaire. They only knew he needed help, and that had been enough. Olivia walked Adam to the door, her voice softened, sincere. I want to meet your family, the people who took care of my father. Adam hesitated. We're not like this place. He glanced around the spacious, beautiful home, but Olivia smiled, warm, without a trace of judgment. That doesn't matter. You didn't do any of this for money. You did it out of kindness. And I want to thank you properly. Adam inhaled deeply, then nodded. All right, but I should get home. My daughter's waiting. Olivia tilted her head, her eyes softening further. You have a daughter? Sophie. She's 6. Something gentle flickered in Olivia's gaze. I would love to meet her. And as the door closed behind Adam, he felt something strange, as if life had just opened a door he never knew existed. 2 days later, Adam was wiping tables at Maple Street Diner when the front bell chimed. He looked up and froze. Olivia Bancroft stepped inside. She was no longer the tear-streaked woman from the porch that night. She wore a sleek gray blazer, dark jeans, her brown hair falling loosely over her shoulders. But what stopped Adam in his tracks wasn't the outfit. It was the warm, genuine smile blooming on her face. Beside her stood Theodore. But not the trembling, lost man Adam had brought home weeks ago. Today, Theodore was clean, freshly shaven, wearing a light blue button-down shirt and khaki pants. His eyes, though still slightly distant, were bright in a way that drew the entire room's attention. Marlene was pouring coffee and nearly dropped the pot. "Good Lord," she muttered. Theodore stepped forward. For the first time since Adam had met him, he stood straight. No stooping, no shrinking. Adam. His voice was steady, clear. I would like to introduce myself properly. My name is Theodore Bancroft, and I owe you my life. The diner fell silent. Customers stopped eating. Marlene stared, slack-jawed. Adam swallowed, his ears burning. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. Olivia stepped up beside her father, her voice soft but resolute. You did what no one else did. You saw a human being, not a problem, not a burden, a real person. She held Adam's gaze. And that means more than you realize. Marlene came forward, wiping her hands on her apron. So who are you really? She demanded. Theodore smiled. I was an investor. Now, I'm just a man trying to find himself again. Marlene studied him for a few seconds, then shrugged. Then keep finding yourself. But next time you wipe tables, hit the corners properly. The tension shattered instantly. Theodore let out a laugh. Rich, full, genuine. Several customers laughed with him. Olivia approached Adam, her voice lowered. Can I talk to you in private? Adam nodded, leading her to the small back room, Marlene's office. She closed the door gently and turned to him. I want to thank you properly. My father told me you have a family, your mother and your daughter. Adam nodded slowly. My mom is Catherine, and my daughter is Sophie. Your wife? Her voice was cautious, not nosy, gentle. Adam drew a breath. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. A flash of pain crossed Olivia's eyes. I'm so sorry. Thank you. She hesitated, then continued. My father told me you work full-time here, and that your home life isn't easy. Adam stiffened. We manage. I didn't mean any offense. Her tone softened. But you gave my family an invaluable gift. Please let me help you. Adam shook his head immediately. I didn't help him for money. I know. Olivia stepped closer, sincerity shining in her eyes. And that's exactly why I want to support you. My company, Bancroft Green Ventures, is hiring for several positions. Stable work, full health insurance, and a salary that would let you stop worrying about utility bills every month. Adam stared. You're serious? Completely. She smiled gently. And Sophie, my father said she's 6, right? My company sponsors a scholarship program. I can guarantee her a spot in a good school, and later, college won't be a burden either. Adam's world tilted. Everything he'd feared he could never give his daughter. Stability, a future, opportunity. suddenly stood right in front of him. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia inhaled slowly, eyes growing deeper. 8 years ago, when my mother died, my father nearly fell apart. He survived, but he didn't truly live. And after the accident, I thought I had lost him again. Her voice tightened. But you brought him back. Not just back home, but back to himself. She brushed away a tear. So please, let me do this for you. Adam looked at Olivia. The woman standing before him was offering everything he'd never dared dream of, not from pity, but from gratitude and respect. In her deep brown eyes, he saw no charity, only sincerity, and something else, something warm he hadn't felt in a long time. Finally, he whispered, "All right." His voice roughened. "I accept." The words seemed to shift the air in the room, as if a new chapter had just opened, one Adam never imagined he would step into. The following week passed like a dream. Adam could hardly believe he was living in. Catherine was invited to Bancroft Green Ventures headquarters, the sleek glass building in downtown Portland, a place she never imagined she would ever step into. Olivia personally interviewed her for an administrative management position. "Your experience managing a household with limited resources shows excellent organizational and prioritization skills," Olivia said, completely sincere. Catherine came home and cried, for the first time not from pressure, but from hope. Adam, meanwhile, was offered a program coordinator position at the company's community center. The job involved working with local teens, organizing after-school activities. "You've proven you can connect with people," Olivia explained, "and that's exactly what we need." And Sophie? She was accepted into Meadowbrook Academy, a prestigious private school Adam had never dared to dream about. When he told her, Sophie leapt into his arms. "Daddy, I'm going to have the prettiest uniform ever." In that moment, Adam understood. Their lives, once fragile and strained, had shifted direction. Forever. But something else also changed. Quietly. Beneath the surface. Each time Olivia stopped by, bringing paperwork, explaining benefits, checking on Theodore, she stayed a little longer. She asked about Sophie, about Catherine, about Adam's life. And Adam found himself telling her more than he had told anyone in years. About Megan, how they met in college, about the illness that hit like a storm, about the nights he sat beside his wife's hospital bed while Sophie slept in his arms, about the medical debt crushing him, about sleepless nights, about the feeling of drowning while still having to stay strong for his daughter. Olivia listened, truly listened, without interrupting, without judging. In return, she told him about Eleanor, her mother, and the battle with cancer that shattered their family. She told him about watching Theodore collapse inward under grief, about the months she feared she had lost him forever. They sat together in Adam's small apartment, which suddenly felt less cramped, sharing the wounds they both carried. And in that sharing, something began to mend. One evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep and Catherine had left for her night shift, Adam and Olivia sat on the small balcony, looking out at the city lights stretching across the distance. "Did you think you'd ever find him?" Adam asked softly. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. "No. After the second month, I started preparing for the worst." She looked down at her cup of coffee. "But I couldn't stop searching. If there was even the smallest chance—" "Then you had to try," Adam finished for her. She nodded. "You understand?" "I do." They sat together in gentle silence, no more words needed. After a while, Olivia turned toward him. Her voice was uncertain, but honest. "Adam, I know this might not be the right time, but I want you to know. Everything I've done for your family, it isn't only out of gratitude." Adam's heart beat faster. "I like being here," she said, cheeks flushing slightly. "With you, with Sophie. She's kind, sweet, just like her father." Warmth spread through Adam's chest. "You're the same," he replied, voice rough. kind to us, to everyone. Olivia gave a small smile. I learned from my dad. He always said, money only matters when it helps someone. She exhaled softly. I think that's why I never really connected with anyone. Most people only see the Bancroft name, the company, the money. I don't see those things, Adam said. I see the woman who cried when she found her father, who worried for him every single day, who sat on the floor playing dolls with my daughter. Olivia stared at him, eyes glowing in the soft light. You really see me? I do. The space between them shrank, slowly, naturally, without force. Olivia leaned forward, hesitant but genuine. Adam did the same. And then, Daddy? They both jolted. Sophie stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear, eyes still sleepy. Can I have some water? Adam shot to his feet, face burning. Of course, sweetheart. I'll get it right now. When he returned, Olivia was sitting with Sophie, asking about her bear, about her new school, listening with a tenderness few people ever showed. And as Adam watched, Olivia kneeling to Sophie's level, smiling as the little girl chattered about her new friend, he felt something shift, quietly but profoundly, inside him. A door he once believed had closed forever was slowly opening again. But not everything went smoothly. 2 weeks later, just as Adam began settling into his job at Bancroft Green Ventures, he sensed that something was different. The looks, the faint whispers behind his back, the half-joking, half-cutting remarks he couldn't figure out how to respond to. Brad, a middle-aged co-worker in an expensive suit, the type of man who breathed surplus confidence, stopped beside the coffee station while Adam was pouring water. So, you're that guy, huh? His voice was casual, but the implication was razor-sharp. The one who saved Mr. Bancroft? Adam nodded, keeping his composure. Yeah, I guess. Brad let out a short, humorless laugh. Clever. Save the boss. Land a nice job. And I hear you're getting cozy with Miss Olivia, too? Adam froze. That's not... Sure. Brad patted Adam on the shoulder, a friendly gesture that somehow felt icy. Just a word of advice. People pay attention around here. Not everyone believes in fairy tales. He walked off, leaving Adam standing there with his stomach twisted tight. That night, Adam couldn't sleep. Brad's words echoed in his mind. Clever move. No one believes in fairy tales. Did people think he was using Theodore? Using Olivia? Using the random accident of fate to change his life? Adam shook his head hard. No, he didn't help the old man in that alley for any reason at all. He didn't expect a job, didn't wait for a reward. He just did the right thing. But now, with the new apartment they were about to move into, with Sophie in a good school, with a stable job for the first time in his life, would people think he was taking something he didn't deserve? And Olivia? Were these feelings real? Or were they tangled with gratitude, loneliness, and hope? The questions twisted painfully in his chest. The next day, Adam drove to see Theodore. The old man, now stronger, carrying himself almost like the person he used to be, was sitting in the study room, glasses perched neatly on his nose as he read the newspaper. Adam, he looked up with a warm smile. Sit down. Adam sat, hands clasped together, knuckles bone white. I need to ask you something, Adam began, his voice hoarse. People are saying I used you and used Olivia. Theodore set the paper aside, his expression turning serious. And what do you think? I don't know anymore. Adam's voice cracked under the weight of it. I didn't help you because I wanted any of this. But now that I have everything, I'm not sure I deserve it. Theodore was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the front yard. You know what I remember first, when my memory started coming back? Adam shook his head. I remember seeing you in that alley, handing me food. Theodore turned, his eyes clear and steady. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what I had. You just saw a man who was hungry, and you helped." He placed a hand on Adam's shoulder, slow and certain. "That is who you are. Not the rumors, the job, the new apartment, Sophie's opportunities. Those aren't rewards. They're things you always deserved, but the world never gave you the chance." Heat stung behind Adam's eyes. Theodore smiled. The smile of a father who understood exactly what was happening inside the young man in front of him. "And about Olivia," his voice softened, but remained firm. "My daughter is a smart woman. She does nothing out of obligation. If she spends time with you, it's because she wants to. Because she chooses you." He looked straight into Adam's eyes. "The real question is, do you want her?" Adam drew a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared it's all too good to be true. Scared I'll mess it up." Theodore gave his shoulder a gentle pat. "That fear only means you care," he said in a tender voice, "but don't let it stop you from living." A long breath escaped Adam, as if a tight knot inside him had finally loosened. That Friday evening, Olivia invited Adam and Sophie to the Bancroft home for dinner. Catherine was invited too, but she politely declined, with a knowing smile. "Go on, dear. Enjoy your evening." So Adam, wearing the only suit he owned, which Theodore insisted he borrow, took Sophie, dressed in her favorite pink dress, up to West Hills. When the door opened, Olivia stood there in a soft navy dress, her hair falling gently around her shoulders. She looked so beautiful that Adam froze for half a beat. "Welcome, both of you," Olivia said with a warm smile that lit the entire house. Dinner was unexpectedly cozy. Theodore told jokes that made Sophie giggle, Olivia asked about the girls' new school, and Adam, for the first time in years, felt he belonged to something again. Not something temporary, not something fragile, a family, or at least the shape of one. After dinner, Sophie drifted asleep on the sofa, hugging her teddy bear. Olivia gently draped a blanket over her before turning to Adam. "Come to the backyard with me?" The backyard opened to the entire city below, the lights shimmering like hundreds of fallen stars. Adam stood beside Olivia, his hand unconsciously tightening on the railing. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "Yes," Olivia replied, though her eyes were not on the city. They were on him. She drew a slow breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage in her chest. "Adam, I need to tell you something." He turned, a flicker of worry crossing his eyes. "I know everything has happened so fast," Olivia continued, her voice so honest, even the wind seemed to quiet for her. "We've only known each other a few weeks, but—" She lifted her gaze, meeting his without a hint of hesitation. "But I can't stop thinking about you, about Sophie, about how everything feels. Right, strangely, deeply right, whenever we're together." Adam's heart thumped hard. He swallowed, nerves rising in his chest. "I feel the same," he admitted, surprised by how true and steady the words sounded coming out of him. "But I'm scared. I'm scared of what people will say. I'm scared I'm not good enough for you." Olivia stepped closer. Only inches separated them now. "Adam," she whispered, her hand lifting to rest softly against his cheek, "you are the best man I've ever met, not because of what you have, but because of who you are." The words hit somewhere deep inside him, a place that had long forgotten how hope felt. "If you want this chance," Olivia said slowly, sincerely, "a chance with me, then I want to try." Adam looked into her warm brown eyes, vulnerable, hopeful, and achingly genuine. Suddenly, he understood. This wasn't about money, not about gratitude, not about repaying a debt or responsibility. It was about two people who had both lost so much and somehow found each other when neither expected it. I want it too, he whispered, his voice barely more than breath. I want this. This time, when Olivia leaned in toward him, no one interrupted. No child's voice. No clattering dishes. No sigh of fear or doubt. Just two people. And the moment they chose each other. Their lips met, soft and careful, but full of warmth. A kiss not of endings, but beginnings. A quiet promise that from this moment forward, neither of them would have to walk alone again. 6 months later. Adam stood in the middle of their new 3-bedroom apartment. Not as luxurious as West Hills, but in a safe neighborhood, with good schools and a park nearby. A place he once believed existed only in Sophie's dreams. Small footsteps pattered across the floor. Sophie darted past him, giggling before throwing her arms around Olivia. "Miss Olivia, have you seen my new room yet?" Olivia laughed softly, letting the little girl pull her away to show it. Catherine stepped out from the kitchen, her hands still warm from the pot of soup. "I made soup. Would you like to stay for dinner?" "I'd love to, Catherine." Olivia's smile was enough to brighten the entire kitchen. Then the doorbell rang. Adam opened it, and there stood Theodore, holding a pastry box, his face glowing. "Heard there was a housewarming." He winked. They gathered in the small dining area, a bit cramped, a bit noisy, a little chaotic, but perfect in its own way. In the middle of dinner, Sophie looked up, her eyes serious in the way only a child's eyes could be. "Daddy, is Miss Olivia your girlfriend?" The room fell silent in an instant. Olivia froze. Adam inhaled quietly, then turned to her. Finally, he smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, if you're comfortable with that." Sophie considered it for half a second, then nodded decisively, as if making an important ruling. "Good, because Miss Olivia is awesome." Laughter burst out, relieved, warm, filling the whole home. Theodore stood up and raised his glass of orange juice. "A toast," he said, his voice full of pride, "to family, old and new, to new beginnings, and to the young man who taught me that kindness is never wasted." They all lifted their glasses. Orange juice, tea, wine, blending together like a simple symphony of happiness. Adam looked around the table. His mother, his daughter, the man he once rescued, and the woman he was falling in love with. In that moment, he understood. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A year later, in the Bancroft backyard garden, under soft sunlight, Adam and Olivia were married. Sophie was the flower girl, radiant in her yellow dress, her feet bouncing gently to the music. Theodore walked Olivia down the aisle, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. Catherine sat in the front row, her eyes full of pride. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" Theodore answered in a strong, steady voice, "Her father, and the man who saved my life." Not a single eye stayed dry. At the reception, Marlene, wearing the dress she had complained about all week, marched up to Adam. "You know, Harlow," she grumbled, "I always knew you were special." Adam laughed. "You never said that." "Because I didn't want you getting a big head." She patted his shoulder. "But you deserve all of this." That night, after Sophie fell asleep in her new bedroom in West Hills, they had moved in with Theodore, Adam and Olivia stood together on the balcony, gazing at the city under a starry sky. "Did you ever think life would look like this?" Olivia whispered. Adam wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her soft hair. "No, never." "Me neither." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "But I'm glad it turned out this way." "So am I." In the warm, quiet stillness, they understood. Family doesn't always come from blood. It's built from kindness, compassion, and love. A small act in a cold alley had changed many lives, and opened a future none of them saw coming. Sometimes, when you save someone, you end up saving yourself, too. Stay with us by liking and subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any heart-touching stories, where even the smallest actions can create miracles.